Testing. When we go live, for everybody to turn their mics on, because we got a lot of complaints about they couldn't hear y'all.
I think so.
Lack of funding problem.
Turn your mics on.
Y'all want to turn your mics on, she said.
Testing. Go ahead and call this, call meeting to order, and this is February 28th. This is a call meeting for the Citizens Law called by Mr. Bonham and Mr. Smith. And I guess we're just, and welcome to the citizens. I guess y'all can go ahead and state what we got.
Okay, thanks for everybody being here today. This meeting was called for several reasons. One, I think we need to, with the assistance of our city attorney, first of all, define the form of government that we have. Secondly, define what our roles are as council and mayor within that city government. There are concerns about the way we are addressing city staff and city positions and any legal ramifications that may come about from the way that we're doing that. There are also procedural matters on where we exist as it relates to personnel matters, where we sit versus where we should live, and then any legal consequences, obviously, from that. And then there are a couple things that were funded that have now been paused. What are the repercussions for that, i.e. the K-9 program and the security checkpoint that we have out there? What can we look at for that? So with that, with help from council, how do we navigate this through what is open session, what is closed session, what do we need to do?
So as far as the question on consulting with lawyers and what's open session and closed session, anything that relates to the form of government, how the council functions, your relationships between each other, communications, that's all open session discussion. So if you want to have that discussion, that's all for open session and discussion there. The meeting request listed some request to consult with the attorney and to the extent that any of the issues relate to personnel matters. So there's a closed session agenda item. If anybody wants to go into closed session, you have the right to make that motion, and if that's approved, either of those items would be closed session items. So if you want to ask questions about risk or to have some discussion about liabilities, that you have that right to do that in closed session under Section 3 of the closed session statute to consult with the attorney. So you have that right. Anything that's personnel related would obviously be appropriate for closed session. So general policy, form of government, communications, relationships among council, all that's open session. Other items you have the right to go into closed session to discuss.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Can we start by, can you identify, explain to us our form of government and how we operate?
I can do that. I think, again, my role is solely to provide legal advice, and so to the extent that this is policy, I do not want to get into that. That's for you all, but from a general standpoint, I think
Right.
you all know that it's the city operates under a council manager form of government, which in general means that communications on how to run the city, how to do the affairs of the city, the day-to-day operations are done by the city manager with some direction from council as to how you want the city manager to operate using the policies that you all are elected to do and decide to do. So there is a little bit of a gray area there because there is obviously some of what the city does is policy-based, and that's for you all to decide. But generally, the day-to-day is to run by the city manager through the department heads. When there are issues of how you want the city to function, how you want the city manager to act, and how you want the departments, the general rule of thumb under a council manager form of government is communications to the manager and some instruction to him as to what information you all need to make decisions on a policy level. So like, in other words, information coming back to you all, and then some direction to him with respect to specific policies you've adopted. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's a real high level.
Yeah, I get it.
It answered mine. Thank you.
I get it. I get it. So what, under this form of government, what are the roles of council and mayor? I mean, you kind of explained it there, but what are our limitations? What can we do, what can't we do, that sort of thing.
So the roles of council and mayor are defined in your rules of procedure. There's not like a handbook or a statutory guideline that says, here's what everybody does, and so there needs to be some consensus among council of how do we operate, how do we communicate together, how do we communicate to the manager in a way that's functional, the way that makes everything work, and then presumably some communication back from the manager to each of you. I've heard you, here's what I'm doing, this is kind of how I'm attempting to implement the directives that you're giving me to run the city. If that's wrong or if there's an issue, let me know, or so that I can do that better. So some lines of communication there. As far as the roles, it's obviously the role of council to set policy, to make decisions on spending, on where you want to go, to set priorities. That's absolutely the role of the council to do. and to do that in open meetings, and then and in your budget retreats, and then to direct the city through that. There is a little bit of a gray area. Obviously, as elected officials, you want to be responsive to members of the community and the constituents who've elected you, and so there is some appropriate and necessary to like be a council person, to be out in the community hearing from people, and you all can't control people contacting you. I mean, you have your emails published on the website. People are going to seek you out whether you want that or not, and that's certainly appropriate. And so then you all need to decide and have some reasonable agreement. Once you get that information, what do you do with it? How do you direct those individuals to the city manager? Do you take that on yourself to discuss with the city manager? All these things are, there's not a specific set of criteria in your rules of procedure or in the state statutes that's going to cover each thing, and that's why there needs to be some communication from, amongst yourselves. How are we going to operate? How are we going to handle this? And also some expectations for the city manager, both in terms of what he'll hear from you and what you need to hear from him with respect to whether it's specific issues, spending issues, policy-based issues, personnel issues, citizen complaints. All those things fall within the realm of some communication with, under the general idea that you all hire the city manager to run the city as you all vote and want it to be run.
Very good. So there's a hierarchy. There is a council and mayor here, and the city manager, and everything filters through the city manager down from there. We stop at the city manager. Correct.
I think that's one way to look at it. You all are sort of like, if you did it in a corporate setting, you are the board of directors and your city manager is the CEO. With the qualification that I tried to say is that as elected officials, it's absolutely appropriate and expected that you all will hear and need to be communicating with the people that elected you and trying to address that. So I don't think, and every council person is going to handle that a little bit differently, but it's not, there is not a bright line that says your role stops at the city manager. If someone contacts you or you want to reach out to individual citizens, you absolutely, in the political realm, have the right to do that.
In a best practices scenario, that, I speak to someone in the community, a taxpayer. My next course of action, if action is needed, is go to the city manager, let the city manager handle their day, not circumvent and go to a department. Is that your interpretation?
I think that is generally how a council manager form of government would function.
Okay.
Correct. Is that person, when you're talking to them, you would say to them, you need to get in touch with the city manager. You probably give the city manager a heads up, talk to this person, I've sent them to you, or you call directly the city manager. This person has expressed a concern to me. I would like you to follow up and give me feedback. Let me know once you've done that so that I know this is resolved. There's going to be some exceptions to that depending on circumstances, so it's not a bright line, Mr. Bonham, but as a general practice, that's how I think the school of government and most commentators on that will interpret a council manager form of government. Again, noting that there's no statute that tells you a specific roadmap for that.
So you're saying it is not illegal or against the law to do that if somebody's done that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There's not any statute that says that they violated some law or ethics code. There is kind of in general for you all to decide how we're going to
Right,
operate
right.
and work together to do that. But, right, there's not a statute.
I think, what I'm looking for, what are the best practices? What do we need to do to maintain the integrity of our form of government and our government here? And what, do we need some guidelines to follow? Guidelines, not rigid, but guidelines to follow that.
Or is that something that we have to make up as a council?
Yeah, so you're starting to get outside of what I think is a legal opinion, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to tell you beyond, here's the basics that you need. And then you all need to decide within that, within these general confines of the council manager form of government, how you wanna,
Because I
How
believe
you-
the rule, Robert rules was adopted at one point in time, Robinson, when, I think when you was on.
Yeah, they were, I mean, they've got a, procedure, rules of procedure.
Yeah, rules of procedure.
What is the, as it relates to speaking to staff during an open meeting, or, whatever it might be, staff or a position in general, how do we convey our concerns as a council without undressing them at the podium or belittling or do anything like that? And what are the legal repercussions for doing so?
so on the second question, I really feel like that's a closed session discussion where you're asking, you're essentially saying, I'd like to have a legal issue and be attorney-client privilege, and to protect that privilege, where you're saying, what's the legal ramifications or the potential liabilities from a certain course of action? That's really a closed session thing, and you want to do that, have that conversation in closed session, so there's a free exchange of information with your attorney on that, just like any attorney-client privilege, you not want to be having that discussion in public. The other part, as far as how you're interacting as council members with staff, falls within this idea of what's the council manager form of government, and for you all to decide what, at what point do we have a concern with staff and what staff's doing, that we take that to the city manager and say, as the head of the personnel department for the city, we want you to address this issue. That is something for you all to talk about and figure out what's your best practice. How do you wanna handle that? And it relates to things that are other than council manager procedure. I mean, there's lots of sort of ramifications that come from that, and some of that, I guess, gets into liability issues in a closed session discussion, but it's not just limited to what are our procedures, what's the best way to operate a city that has lots of different people doing lots of different things.
So again, best practice, in your opinion, would be if you had an issue with a city employee or a position in general, is to go offline with the city manager and not necessarily condemn the position or the person publicly in front of a city council meeting.
Again, it is not appropriate for me to tell you all what your best practices is. You all have to decide that. I can tell you here generally how the council manager form of government works. That would be the common way to go about that, but beyond that, that is for you all to decide, and it's not really the role of the attorney to be telling you all what your best practice. I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm trying to say, this is my role to provide answers to legal questions when asked, and I'm not an elected person like you all. I just try to provide like the basic, but then the rest of that is for this council to discuss and agree on.
Excuse me, I'm listening to what he's saying, I understand that, but when you got employees in the building, in the city council chamber, and you have, a question comes up, I don't see anything wrong with asking a question to anyone. And I think the city manager should, take care of his employees whenever they're out of line, he should speak up and say, listen, don't be insubordinate. And that's the way it should be, and if you have a problem with that, there's something wrong. He's the city manager, I'm not. But if you have a problem with any employee, or, whatever, insubordination is insubordination. And we have, if it's like today, we got employees here. This is, I don't know why we have employees here, but I guess you do, I don't know. It's just a matter of common sense and common practice. As a city councilman, we're here to conduct business for the city. No matter what arises, a question from you, a question from Mr. Attaway, and each council member, whatever, you have a prerogative to ask a question. But to, fire someone or something like that would be wrong. But as far as the way we conduct business, I don't see anything wrong with the way we conduct business. And when you have employees speaking against or up, making statements in an open, like a work session or whatever, that's chain of command. That needs to go, they need to go to the city manager and talk to him, not come to a council meeting and express their opinions. I mean, I just don't see that being the right way to do it. Unless, just like today, we have these folks here, that anyone would like to speak or whatever, would be out of order, correct? Because this is a session call with these two gentlemen, and we understand that you gotta be here to understand it. If you're not here, you can't understand it. But being in the council chamber and asking questions at the time, and things come up, and we don't have nothing pre-planned, that's, we just don't do that. I don't do that. I don't expect none of y'all to do that.
Well, as I've stated to you before, if it's on the agenda, we need to stick to the agenda. We've talked about that before. But falling off agenda, having meetings for 3 hours and plus change, that we shouldn't have that unless it's on the agenda. But other than that, if discipline somebody, I see going behind closed doors. That's what Mr. Bonham's inquiring about, Mr.
Right.
Smith, and I understand going behind closed doors. But this, to me personally, this meeting today was totally uncalled for. I mean, it could have waited until either Friday at the work session or March the 12th or whatever that date is. That could have waited. As we all stated before, when Mr. Simons called that meeting, yeah, I agree, that meeting shouldn't have been called for a special meeting. This one shouldn't have been called because we're wasting taxpayers' money getting the attorney in here. It could have waited until Friday or next
How would
month.
you expect to add this to a city council meeting when we're letting Larry talk for 3 hours, we're doing an hour of business?
I think
and
we've
then
talked
try
about
to
that, how
do
we can
that?
correct that. I believe
Is
I was
anybody
told
on
by one
board
of
with
those two that-
correcting that?
how to correct that.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Chipwood just addressed that. We need to stay on the agenda during meetings. So I think we're all in agreement with that.
I think there were a couple of concerns for me with that. One, that our attorney would not be present at the March meeting. We'll probably have a fill-in, I would assume, just to make sure that nothing blows up. But the historical data will not be here with John. Secondly, based on the last meeting, in the undressing that the mayor gave to our city employees, our good city employees, staff, I'm not about to go through another meeting of that crap and wait till the end of the meeting to address this. We're gonna have an exodus coming. We're losing good people because of the result of this election. And you may not want to agree with it, you may not care, and that's up to y'all. But it's going away, and given the reputation that we have now as a result of this, trying to backfill that position is gonna be even harder. You can't recruit and retain when you've got a city official blowing you up at the podium, just trying to make a presentation on doing your job. Doesn't matter if you agree with the job, or you think the position is warranted, that doesn't matter at that point. You don't treat people the way that some people have treated these guys, standing up here just doing their job.
As I told you the other day, yesterday when I talked to you, I couldn't hear what Mr. Simons was saying
Mhm.
because of the volume
Well,
on
the
the
audio,
thing.
yeah,
So
I get
I
that.
got aggravated listening to that meeting and I shut it off,
Mhm.
because I can't hear it. If I can't hear it, that's why I've talked to Mr. Attaway about,
Right.
that's why they're all on now.
They're all on. It's not only that, it's at what button do you push would again, this may be a closed session issue. What are we setting ourselves up for? What is harassment? How many times can you call in here and do this, and this, and this, and this, and this before it's a problem? You know, we're in times now where it's just not like it was years ago. Can't just get away with being a bully. So how are we exposing ourselves with this type of behavior? And what are we doing to the city as a result of this behavior?
I think to the extent you're asking me that question, that's really, you're asking to consult with a lawyer on liability and to protect the attorney-client privilege. That's really a close, to answer that, I would need to be in closed session.
I want to backpedal on the employees. The position for Parks and Rec that resigned, have we had any applications filled for the
We've had one
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 in 2
yesterday.
weeks?
a little over 2 weeks.
And I feel that's gonna be a problem. I mean, people are not gonna wanna come work for this city the way that we've been acting in these meetings and talking to our staff. It's just not a good look.
What was stated to the, recreation right now,
I'm not talking about in general.
I'm just talking about, the
staff.
only person I talked with was the chief and the, zoning guy last meeting night. And the questions I asked were legitimate questions, there wasn't anything that was wrong. I mean, if you have an ordinance to allow stuff that they were talking about doing, then that ordinance should be upheld. If you don't have an ordinance for that, it shouldn't be allowed. And that's just my opinion, that's all it is, an opinion, I don't make law, y'all do.
Well, I think holding your opinion to yourself in a public setting, given your position, is part of your responsibility. Secondly, when you sit there and tell a guy that I don't even think we need this position, or, you know, you need to do this, you need to do this, or calling up City Hall 4 times a day and saying, I need this. If you really want to know the answer to stuff, put your crap together, make your list, call the city manager and say, hey, I'd like to make a point with you on whatever date you have available. I want to cover these things so he can prepare and sit down and do your deal.
What about
Instead of
contact city?
grandstanding
What-
up here
what-
and showboating and doing all the stuff that you do. You're running off good employees. You're not going to be able to recruit and retain anybody to come
Who
behind
I
them.
ran off?
So if you want, you got 2 right now,
Who?
Sue and Tori.
Sue left before, you can blame them. on
Sue was
that.
after the election. Sue was after the election, she said, I'm not
Larry
handling
never-
any more of those phone
Larry
calls.
Larry had another conversation with her about anything other than the fact that she was a great employee, a tremendous employee,
Yep.
but good character and had
I
an
believe Rach
accounting.
has something to say about Sue.
And I can address Sue.
Yeah, that's what pissed me, excuse my language, whenever I
Sue
called
actually
me.
left, not because of the mayor,
No.
because of current employees that we have here is the reason Sue left. Had
That's a
nothing to
different
do
story
with-
that I got.
Yeah,
So,
but he knows the truth, your manager. He needs to get with you and talk with you about
Well, it's
that.
funny how Sue spoke to him personally, and that's the story she gave. So,
This is not a story from any other employees, it
Not
was
third
straight
party.
from Sue Lowe herself that explained to me why she was leaving. And it had nothing to do with this election or the mayor.
that was a different explanation than you gave me.
You need to get
That's all I
educated.
can tell you.
And Sue gave you,
Yes. That's all I can say about that.
It's a shame and disgrace. You know, anytime you have employees, it's good to have them. It's great. And the experience you can't replace. There's a lady that here for a long time had an accounting degree and never was respected for having an accounting degree and things like that. I mean, I think it's sad, you know, it's just a lack of communication. That's what this whole deal's about. You know, I speak my mind. I'm sorry if it offends anyone, but I didn't run for a popularity contest. I ran to get this town back to where it needed to be, to where people can afford to live here. People that pay their taxes and live here. People that pay their taxes and live here. That's who we need to respect. Not people that come in here half-cocked with something on their mind or personal vendetta. I don't have a personal vendetta against no one. And I think Scott and we've been discussing things about things. I don't think if I ever demanded you do anything or you're gonna get fired, if I ever fired you, if I ever tried to fire you or say you were fired. Absolutely not. We have discussions, yes. But we have never had have you ever had a point where you felt like I was harassing you by asking you serious questions about what we do and what needs to be done every day in everyday business? I mean, I ask you if you can do this, you say yes, I say fine. If you say no, it's okay. I can't make you do anything. And I have not tried to make you do it.
Do you want a response
Yes.
to that? Yeah, I mean, there's been instances where there's been, a lot of requests and some redundant requests that have already been, either emailed or delivered. I don't know if there's any other question within that, but if you're just asking about your inquiries, yeah, there's sometimes a lot of inquiries, but with new boards, I welcome the communication.
We don't have communication. We
Uh,
don't
not-
know.
Per se, the request of just always information, that's fine, you know, public records are public records, but, more of, I think more communication would help all the council members. As I've stated before, a number of times, you know, I have an open door policy, and some exercise that where I'll get an appointment request and we go over a project, or some of the things that, there's a lot that happened last year, right, in the last couple years. And bringing you all up to speed on kind of where everything's at, I welcome those communications and meetings.
As far as ever coming down physically attacking you or whatever, we've always had a good rapport, I think, as far as talking about things. I never threatened you in any way, shape, form, or fashion, other than the fact I just need what I need, and that's the truth, you know. It's like, if I ask you a question, I just ask for an answer, that's all. I know you don't have the right to, set policy or whatever, but when we're talking about different things in the city or whatever, yes. I mean, I just wanna know, why, you know, my question, you know, just like in anything, why don't we take bids? And we've asked for bids, and I know we're working on the community center now. In my knowledge, I don't see no bids. And I think we've asked for bids, and a different procedure. I know it's a manager, council form of government, sitting on this board. We need to be able to answer to the public, why are we paying so much money for this, or why don't we have bids? I mean, it's just common sense, it's a common sense practice. I wouldn't, at my home, if I had a roof to put on, I'd take estimates. And in a city, you should take estimates.
Well, I think part of that too is, you know, we're working now on trying to find direction through the budget process on what do you wanna do with the Boys and Girls Club, and how do we wanna do that, and how do we attack this? At the same time, when you've got somebody grabbing the fire chief to a piece of dirt that the city has acquired, and talking to him about taking that over and building a new, you have no idea about what's going on there, and the process of bringing that back, I think is extremely premature. You know, and taking things by your own, just I wanna do it. You talk about communication, there's no communication there. It's, I wanna do this is what I want, and I don't give a damn what anybody else says, and I'm gonna try to push this thing through. Yeah, it takes a phone call. How does this work? What is the procedure of even trying to accomplish this? Lay this out for me. And you're sitting out there walking around a piece of property, you know, we can ask for a grant to do this.
You know, that's the most outrageous, outlandish, biggest lies I've been told. The chief contacted me about wanting to find a piece of property where they could build a new fire department. He's been working with Torbett, as you well know, and they needed a new fire truck, and he was trying to put this thing together. And I told him the only piece of property that the town of Lowell owns that would be suitable for a fire department would be the piece of property beside the Presbyterian church. He came up and looked at it, yes, but nothing, I can't make a decision.
No, you can't.
And then here's the thing, and we got it on the agenda for Friday, it's the
Excuse
work
me.
session to
Excuse
talk
me,
about
I
it.
think we're getting on or off the subject. This can be put on the agenda if y'all want to discuss this fire department deal, put it on the next month's
That needs to
agenda.
go off, but, yes, you're correct, Mr. Chipwood. I apologize.
It's on the agenda for Friday, the work session.
I don't think it is.
It's on there Friday.
We've got it, that was the fire tax district
be
that
here
you
to discuss
inquired
it
about,
with you
that
as
we're
well.
gonna speak during the revenue, forecast about the fire tax district that you asked to get put on the agenda. And I suppose during the City Hall Police Complex, first agenda item of the work session, you could talk about the fire department being there instead of City Hall, because that's the first item on the agenda.
Wasn't it you that said that, could be wrong, a lot of things about bad memory, but I believe you said the deed had a restriction by the church saying that it was a city hall / police, and that was it?
Yes, our contract that we signed with the church specified that It was to be a city hall and/or police complex built on the property. I think there was a concern from them, you know, the city buys their property, that we change their mind, we sell it back out, you know, and that, you know, something
Something else. could-
not desirable to them ends up there. And there's a parking agreement, lease, or not lease, but a parking agreement in there with them too, so that they can occupy some parking places certain days of the week and whatnot.
We'll discuss it
Anything
then.
you wanna,
So a phone call could have just taken care of it right there. Yeah.
That's good to know, and, you know, we don't have, you not brought us up to nothing about anything you bought, the Boys and Girls Club, you spent them $500,000 for that you didn't, they wanted to put a roof on it, you ended up buying it. And this deal with the Methodist Church, which is, you know, y'all, the whole council voted for that, there's nothing we can do about it. But as far as knowing anything about it, as far as the agreement, we don't know, I don't know anything about it. Have you been told anything about the agreement? Nothing's been brought up to me about it. Maybe Friday I'll find out. Anything else?
I guess make a motion to go to closed session. Talk about some legal stuff.
Second.
statute.
What's wrong with, we're having a good discussion now. What do we need to go into executive session? What's the reason for the executive session?
You
Well,
need
we'll
to
talk about
include
that.
the reason, if you're making a motion, the motion needs to be to
Oh, okay.
either
I,
discuss.
I want to, motion to go to closed session to talk about legal ramifications, from, staff harassment, potentially, potential, liabilities for eliminating the security checkpoint, and any financial obligations we may have on terminating the K-9 program.
So all those would fall under consulting with the attorney under 143-318.11, section 3.
Motion's made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, go into executive session. Sorry about that.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.